Australians are in love with their cars. 79% of us take the car to work, compared with only 14% taking public transport. In the 1940s, Australia reached peak public transport patronage because the only way to get around was public transport, and our cities were designed for only that. But in the 1950s, cars became really affordable, so they became really popular and Australians kind of forgot about public transit. Other than lucky old Melbourne, every capital in Australia tore up their extensive tram networks, and investment in public transport consistently fell in the decades that followed. When you ask people why, they'll just say the same old things. The buses don't show up half the time. Trains bring crime to the area. Cars take you anywhere.
Anywhere?
Well, anywhere there's roads. Public transport is slower. Is this true though? Let's discuss data as I race myself from home in the suburbs to work in the CBD. I'll be driving, and I'll take the train. Good luck. Luck? You see, driving only gives the perception of freedom. For starters, it's really expensive. A survey by One Car Marketplace found that, on average, a car costs $15,754 to run each year. You could buy a whole car for that. Cars have given urban planners, developers and politicians reason to spread out as much as possible. It was once unthinkable to build new housing developments far away from trams, trains or ferry services. But now, any cow paddock can become the home of a new garage with a house attached to it. It usually doesn't matter if there's no good public transport here, so long as there's roads. Indeed, many of these new suburban developments are public transport deserts, where residents have no choice but to use their expensive cars to get to work, school, the shops, or to visit friends. Now that's freedom of choice. On top of all of that, cars and car infrastructure take up a huge amount of space. For instance, if we took a train carriage full of people and put them all on the road in a car each, it would look like this. According to reports, the average Australian commute takes 54 minutes. And I live in Sydney, the biggest and most congested city in the country. So my average commute is taking 62 minutes. Thank goodness this video is being edited. Then there's pollution. Passenger cars contribute 60% to our total transport emissions, whereas rail, both passenger and freight, contributes only 2.6%. So I guess you could say cars contribute to smog and trains contribute to smug. After paying nearly $20 in tolls, I'm finally in Sydney CBD. And well, trying to find a cheap place to park the car while at work is practically impossible. Look, I could spend about $7 an hour and park it out on the street, but I don't think my boss would be too happy if I'm moving the car every hour. So instead, I'm paying nearly $70 a day to park my car in a private car park. No one really talks about the cost of driving crisis. You'd think with road rage, traffic, parking, tolls, accidents, registration, pollution, and having to listen to the radio, that this would put people off driving, but no, this is all normal. In fact, there's a word to describe this belief that driving is as essential to society as water. It's called moto-normativity. Ah yes, the cultural inability to think objectively and dispassionately about how we use cars. Put simply, Australians are all afflicted by car brain. On average, 1,200 people die on our roads each year. Yet, for the most part, we simply shrug our shoulders every time someone dies on our roads, accepting it as a tragic yet inevitable statistic. Do you know how many people die on Australia's railways on average each year? Go on, how many? 13. 1,300? 1,000? No, 13. Now, to be perfectly clear, we're not suggesting that cars are completely inferior to public transport. They absolutely have their place. Cars have helped our cities grow, dramatically reducing the tyranny of distance. They also play a hugely important role in allowing for the journeys that public transport can't, particularly those out in the country. You can't exactly catch a train at 3 a.m. in the morning to the local grocery store, can you? And the thing is, public transport has its own problems. Services can be slow and sometimes just not show up at all. The thing is, when designed well, a lot of the great things about cars can also be true about public transport. In big cities like Hong Kong, stations are located pretty much everywhere, which means you can use public transport to get practically anywhere. Services are also really fast, with a 99.9% reliability. And that's because they actually invest in public transport. Meanwhile, Australia spends 5 times as much on roads as we do on rail.
Now, granted, Hong Kong is a far denser city than Sydney, but if you ask me, the point still stands. You get what you pay for.
The best cities aren't those where everyone can afford a car. It's where everyone, young, old, rich and poor, uses public transport.
Well, I suppose I should probably go home.
Want a lift?
No thanks.